This is our first handmade project, Nissan Skyline R34 GTR. And this is 7 months of progress, Nissan GTR R35 Premium. Let's check how far we've progressed in 7 months after 13 projects. We will do a comparison of the first handmade build we ever made and the latest, and check every mistakes and improvements we made so far. Proportions seems to be right, the width as well, maybe the roof shape and height could have been a little adjusted. Proportions are 1:1, the shape is very improved, and the roof height is correct. Paint job has imperfections and no primary and clear coat were applied. Nevertheless, it still looks acceptable. The paint is almost spot on. Several primary coats were applied along with hours of sanding, also multiple layers of paint and one clear coat for finishing touches. Front fender looks okay, but doesn't blend that good with the rest of the car body. Also, the rear one could use a little more work and attention to the finishing touches. On the other hand, the front one blends perfectly with the rest of the body and allow a good continuation with the door panel. Also, the rear fender allow the perfect transition with the back of the car. Hood lines are good, but it lacks the fine details. Also, the proportions seems a little off, but blends okay with the rest of the body and the windows. On the other hand, the hood has all the details and the vents. Also, the proportions are correct. Beside all these is openable, allowing full engine bay view. Trunk seems okay and blend good with the window. Nevertheless, there was still room for improvements. The trunk has the right size and allow a good attachment for the spoiler. On the R34, the headlights lacks the fine details. The clear cover is also missing and the size is a bit off one to another. Also, the taillights are missing the depth and the fine details, not to mention the proportions to the actual model. The headlights on the R35 are packed with tiny details and follow the pattern of the real car. Also, due to the fact of techniques improvement, we managed to bend and create a clear cover that resembles the actual glass cover. We've also improved the proportions of the taillights and added the missing depth and details. The front bumper on the R34 is simplified due to the lack of skills and missing specific details. Also, the bumper grille were made from an old speaker cover, which was hard to cut and not as detailed as possible. The fender doesn't blend that good with the front lip. Nevertheless, it has a visible intercooler, which is a nice touch. Also, the car logo is changed from the lack of skills and attention to tiny details. The rear bumper is not fully accurate to the actual model. Nevertheless, it has a few details, like the exhaust made from a small plastic tube, brake and reverse lights, and also a license plate. The diffuser area is also simplified. The R35 GTR front bumper is recreated one-to-one. We also found a new mesh for the grille bumper, more detailed and easier to cut. We added extra details using aluminum tin can. The splitter is more accurate and more detailed. And we've also paid more attention to details, especially on the logo, using as well aluminum tin can. On the rear as well, we've improved, like adding metal tube for the exhaust for a more realistic appearance. Also, the diffuser area is more complex and more complete. And as a final touch, we've added our own logo on the license plate. The body lines are accurate, but the door hinge is exposed due to wrong misalignment. There are some nice details like the signalings, side skirts, and also the fuel tank door. The R35 has even more details with the use of the aluminum tin. The door hinge is almost invisible and the side skirt looks more realistic and accurate. Also, the side skirt has extra features, the vents to the rear end like the actual model. The door operate fine due to an upgrade to the hinge, but initially there was a bulky prototype closing and opening system, which you can see their remnants. Wing mirror looks okay, and we used reflective paint for extra realism at that time. As we advanced with our projects, we developed a simpler, more effective opening and closing system which allowed better fit and alignment for the doors. As for the mirrors, we took full advantage of the tin cans for extra touch of realism. Initially, the roof was built along with the sides. Not being a separate piece was very limiting at that time, and we weren't able to recreate all angles and curves right. But for our first handmade project, it looks pretty good. The windows are far from perfect. There are lots of tiny gaps between them and the chassis. Also, the side one are missing because we haven't figured a way out of how to attach them, how to do a perfect fit, and also how to open the doors without ripping them apart. The roof now is a perfect recreation of the real model. Improving our ways of how to build a model step by step has led us to develop a pattern for these models. Now the roof is constructed individually from a separate piece, which allow us to better replicate all of the aspects. Also, the windows are now constructed from a simpler material with a special handmade technique, which makes gaps non-existent and allow us to curve and do better fitments between them and the chassis. Also, certain accessories like the spoiler from a simple piece of plastic is now a complex part of the build which follows all the aspects of the real model. As for the first model, we decided to do a couple of details, like the gas tank and transmission. The whole underside is held by one single screw. We keep this simple pattern throughout all of our projects. At one end, it's held like a classic battery box, with two plastic pieces pressing down to each other, and at the other end it's held by the screw. Simple, but effective. The dashboard is a separate piece and has a few details, but not as much attention to the tiniest, and also lots of improvised elements to easily fit into the chassis. Although it fits on, it lacks the right dimensions accordingly with the rest of the interior. The seat seems to be too close one to each other, and the dimensions are a little off compared with the interior capacity. Other than that, it has nice details like the shifter, pedals, and seat belts, although most of them are improvised. A unique feature of this first project is a prototype independent suspension kit which was made from 4 small springs. Though we never got to finish this prototype, we are keeping this pattern on hold for a future off-road project. The suspension kit works well without the chassis, but due to a miscalculation, it doesn't have enough room to move up and down with the body on. A problem we have to keep in mind for that future project. Disassembly on our latest project is even easier. Although the underside pattern is pretty much the same, the proportions are better and the fitment of the body with the underside align perfectly, revealing a more than ever detailed interior who follow every aspect of the real car model. Not only the dashboard is detachable, but also the rear seats, making everything easier to work on later upgrades, or if you need to reach easy access to the other components of the model. The dashboard and the steering wheel are more detailed than ever, resembling every aspect of the real car. We even recreated the tiniest model of the cockpit as far as possible, because of the scale limitation and the handmade factor. The seat proportions are now right, and beside that, they have even more details like the seatbelt holders. Even the pedals works if you press them. We also opted for several color combinations to make the interior more interesting and implemented many details using aluminum tin cans, such as the cup holder between the seats. The proportions of the components of the interior are accordingly with the overall capacity, making everything fit right, and the color combination makes an easy eye-catching. The wheels on the R34 are completely handmade. Despite the imperfections, it's quite impressive to make wheels without power tools. Centering the wheels and making them spin right was the most difficult part of completing such a project at that time. It even lacks the cover behind the wheel. The tire has a lot of imperfections being made from rubber tape. You can see the seaming where the two ends meet each other. Overall, the structure of the underside has a lot of imperfections and miscalculation, but nevertheless, it provides good integrity and rigidity to the body of the car. As our skills evolved, so were the tools we used to make our job a little easier, allowing us to take the projects to the next level and add more details that we couldn't achieve by hand. So now we are using the 3D printer to make perfect centered wheels with tiny details beyond our handmade skills. Also, the brake discs, from simple pieces of plastic who were spinning with the calipers, have evolved into innovative systems which allow the brake disc to spin freely while the caliper stays in place. And with the use of the aluminum tin, we are able to add a new touch of realism. The assembly is a little bit narrow and requires some attention not to break the internal components of the car, making the interior not as easily accessible. But after everything is in place, the whole car is rigid enough to be easily handled, and it's held in place by one single screw. With the whole body complete, the car performed well enough, without counting the fact that the wheels aren't perfect circles. On the latest project, the assembly is done in a matter of seconds. Everything fits precise, and there are no major risks of breaking the internal components. After everything is in place, the whole body as well is held by one screw. Although the handling require more care due to the fragility of some 3D wheels model. But the smoothness of the wheels spinning is at another level. As we progressed with our projects, we pushed ourselves to reach new boundaries and create scale models from scratch as real as possible and make everything openable beside the doors. All our models from now on will have full engine bay view, with the engine build as close to reality as possible. And we are aiming as high as creating complex lighting systems and adjustable suspension kits. As for the V6 of the R35, we'll let you decide if it's detailed enough. Thanks all for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content.